Hi guys, so I am here today to talk about overhyped books. Oh, it's always contentious when you talk about books that you didn't necessarily like and that you're being more critical about things, because obviously the possibility is that you're going to criticise a book that somebody else loves, especially when they're overhyped books, because that suggests that lots of people have loved them, you've heard lots of good things about them, and that's why you've picked them up. So please do take this as meaning overhyped to me. If they are your favourite books, then literally nothing against your reading taste. I think there's some books that I have loved that other people hate, and I'm totally okay with that. But these are books that essentially I have read because there's been a lot of hype around them, they've been quite popular, lots of people have been talking about them, and I've been disappointed. So they're not necessarily my most hated books of all time, but they're books I had high hopes for, and they just did not deliver. And I'm going to tell you why, and perhaps some of them are books as well that you felt similarly about, felt that they were overhyped, or perhaps the reasons I didn't like them might be things that you don't like in literature, so you might want to avoid them. So I do hope you enjoy this video, but without further ado, let's get into the books. So I'm going to start with probably one of my most recent overhyped reads. It was a book I read last year and thought I was going to really enjoy, and that is Final Girls by Riley Sager. So I was loving my thrillers last year. I was reading a lot of thrillers, really getting into the genre, not having read much before, and Final Girls hit the scene right during my thriller binge. Everyone was talking about it, everybody was raving about it, and the concept sounded so fascinating. It's about this protagonist who is a final girl, which is what the press dubbed these three women that survived massacres, serial killers, like mass killings, and she is one of three that the press have given this name Final Girls to, and one of her fellow Final Girls has recently died, and another one of the Final Girls has come to talk to her about it. So that was a really interesting premise to me, and there was some twisty turny moments in this. There was a good twist near the end that I didn't see coming straight off, so that was really good. But most of my reading experience with this was really frustrating. I found it very hard to get into the head of the protagonist. Now obviously sometimes you just have to accept that a character behaves in a way that you don't fully follow and that they're different from you, and that's fine, but there is still some expectation from the author that they will convince you of this, and I just did not get why the author, why the main character was behaving the way she was, why she was kind of interacting with certain people the way she was. It didn't always make sense to me, and I found her and the other Final Girls' behaviour so frustrating. I just felt really frustrated for the whole thing, and rather than being fascinated or thrilled throughout most of it, I just felt a combination of frustrated and bored, and I persevered because people had said it was so good and I wanted to know what the twist was at the end, and that was quite good, but I don't think it was worth the bit in between where I was really lagging. So unfortunately this one was not for me. But next up we have a bit of a controversial one, and I did not hate this book by any means. There was things about this book that I really liked, but it's again been so hyped up that I don't think it's as good as the hype suggests, and that is The Power by Naomi Alderman. This is probably one of the highest rated books on this list. This got 3 stars from me as opposed to say 2 or 1 star, because there was a lot of merit in it, but I just thought it wasn't necessarily executed as well as it could have been, although it was a novel concept. So this one is a sort of dystopian novel. It kind of starts now and then goes on for a few years, and we follow what happens to the world after it has been discovered that women have this new ability to sort of control electricity in people's bodies, giving them a physical strength that they didn't previously possess, making them much stronger than men, having this power that men didn't have, the power. And that turns the whole world on its head, and things change quite quickly. And that was my problem with this book. The pacing just did not work for me. I think the concept was really interesting, and it was a multiple perspective story, but perhaps if either it had been longer, had less perspectives, or hadn't jumped in time so often, so you'd be like now, 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, jumping forward quite quickly and just assuming things had happened in between that you really didn't follow any narrative for and didn't get any detail for what happened in between. You just had to accept the next stage of the journey, and for me it just really didn't work as a reading experience. I just did not like that pacing. It felt too quick. Now, by the time I got to the end of the story, this is another one where I quite like the end. There's this epilogue, and I really enjoyed the epilogue of the book. But was the journey worth it? Not sure it was. Just was really lacking in pacing for me, and I found it really difficult to get into. It just felt too rushed. And that was my main criticism with it. And it's an interesting concept that I feel like deserved more space or less characters or more detail to be explored in, rather than the way it was explored. But lots of people love this book, so it obviously worked for some people, but it wasn't what I was wanting. We then have Rivers of London by Ben Oranovich. Now this is a sort of comedy fantasy series, urban fantasy, set in London, and it follows a police detective who is caught up in sort of the paranormal section of the London Police Department, and has to kind of solve a kind of paranormal crime along with another detective. And this was quite funny in moments, and I quite liked the main character most of the time, and I also thought it was a fun concept, although I found myself getting lost a little bit, which can happen with, you know, a combination of comedy, crime and fantasy. It's hard to keep a track of all the different threads and not get a little bit lost sometimes, so that wasn't my main problem with it. My main problem with it was the way it talked about the female characters. They literally felt like objects to me as a reader. The protagonist, who otherwise I liked as a character, we're getting the story from his perspective, constantly talked about like every woman he saw's breasts. He was so focused on their physical appearance. I feel like we learned so little of any of the female characters' personalities because all we heard about were their breasts. It just seemed so objectifying in it, and to no purpose, to absolutely no purpose did this seem to lend itself in the novel, other than just pure objectifying of female characters and inability to perhaps see them as more than breasts. So that was my main problem with that one. We then have another contentious one, and I've actually mentioned that I don't like this book before, and people are always shocked, but I then always find people in the comments that understand why I don't like it and also didn't like it and feel less alone, so I'm going to mention it here briefly, and that is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I know people love this book, and it is more of like a children's early YA book, so perhaps I should have read it when I was younger, and I didn't. I read it in my 20s, although I'm sure there's people who have read it in their 20s and still really enjoyed it. But I'm not sure it was ever the book for me, and I just read it because it was so hyped. It was talked about like it was faultless and everybody loved it and it was like the best book ever written. But I don't really like books set during World War II, which this is, so I would not have picked it up if it wasn't for the hype, so I just don't think it was for me. But I just did not get why everybody loved this book. I predicted the ending, and I think, again, interesting concept. So often it's an interesting concept, but it's just not necessarily written in a style that worked for me. It follows a young girl during World War II, and it's narrated by like a strange omnipresent narrator who I can't remember if you know who they are at the beginning of the story, so I won't say. And yeah, it's just full of all the kind of sad, tragic stuff that happens during World War II, which is obviously important to discuss and talk about, but fiction set during World War II has never really been my cup of tea. And I just did not get into this. I just wasn't interested, and I just felt like I saw what was going to come, and in between that I didn't feel that emotionally tied to it, despite it being about such a serious topic. So I can't really pinpoint what it was about this one that I didn't love, other than perhaps just the frustration of being told that this was amazing, and when I said to people I wasn't really enjoying it, them basically telling me I was wrong, which is always going to put someone off a book. Don't tell them they're wrong for not liking a book, because everyone has different tastes and not everybody's going to like every single book. Just, you know, in that scenario I just get really annoyed, and then annoyed with the book even more because it's like I'm being told that I'm stupid for not enjoying it, which is silly. Then we have Animal by Sarah Pascal. This is a non-fiction book, and it's a non-fiction book about, I have no idea what really the point was. It's about the body, and it's about men and women, and it's set kind of bits of biography from Sarah Pascal's life, and it's bits of comedy because Sarah Pascal is a comedian and she's a funny comedian. And if this had just been a comical biography of Sarah Pascal and her experience dating and relationships and growing up and being a woman, it could have been awesome. But instead she decided to try and write something which was a combination of all of those things, and also kind of trying to understand the science and biology behind men and women and why they act a certain way, and it was full of so many generalizations. It was full of misinterpretations of evidence I'm familiar with. There was some misinterpretations or misquotations or whatever of Plato. And obviously as a classicist, I'm quite familiar with Plato, so I was like, this is wrong. So how much of the science is wrong? It felt like she was just not doing a lot of research, picking out sentences from actual researchers' books here and there to make them fit in with what she wanted to say, and not actually doing any real research herself. Like, I don't know why I would want to read a book like that from somebody who isn't an expert and isn't even going to properly immerse themselves in the topic. So I'm just getting random, like, basically I read this interesting fact and I want to tell you guys about it because it's given me this theory about men and women and I'm going to explain it to you, but it's not really based in anything, and it completely overlooks the fact that not all men and women are heterosexual. And on occasion the author does say, obviously this doesn't apply if you're gay or whatever, because that wouldn't be true. But just like adding LGBT plus people as a footnote here and there as if they're atypical in some way is really weird and really insensitive, and the whole thing just didn't work for me. I didn't really enjoy it, which is a shame because I do like Sarah Pascal. Next up, because I had to mention it, it's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling. I mean, obviously this is overhyped because what book could possibly be more hyped than a Harry Potter book has ever been? Harry Potter is like one of the most hyped series of all time, let's be honest. And Harry Potter and the Cursed Child was naturally incredibly hyped when it was coming out. It was the sequel to the 7 original books, although in play format, about Harry's children. And yes, it is reading a play, and I have not seen the stage performance, and I am sure the stage performance is wonderfully acted, has amazing special effects, and is just stunning to watch, because that is all I have heard about the stage production, and I am sure that is true. But as a reading experience, I am judging this book as a reading experience because that is the way that I could afford to experience it. So there we go. And the plot. I'm judging the plot as well because the plot was rubbish. But I did not like this book and I was so excited for it. I had such high hopes. Harry Potter is such an important part of my life. I just was so bubbling over with excitement for this book coming out. I downloaded it at midnight on my Kindle, and then I just got more and more disappointed as I was reading it. I did not understand the characterisation of Harry, Ron and Hermione half the time. Harry didn't make sense as an adult to me based on the way he'd behaved as a child. It was like she tried to dump all these different fan theories into one place and create something quite lazily, I felt, as opposed to what was so wonderful about the original stories. Gosh, I feel like I'm definitely going to upset some people. Please don't be upset if you like these books. This was just my experience of reading them, and you can't change the way a person felt whilst reading a book. I'm going to mention a graphic novel now, or a comic book series, which I don't really know why I disliked, but I more so just don't understand why everybody liked it so much, and that was the first volume of Sex Criminals. I gave up on this halfway through because everybody seems to love this comic book series, and I just didn't think it was funny or engaging or any of those things, or interesting. And obviously that's not a very critical or nuanced opinion, but I kind of just want to understand why everybody loves it so much and what I was missing and didn't see in it, because it just fell flat for me, that one. But obviously that's not very helpful feedback. That's more of a, why do you like it if you did like it, and if you didn't like it, why didn't you like it? Can you explain to me why I didn't like it one? But I'm gonna leave it there. Obviously there's loads of books I don't like, but those are the ones that in the past couple of years that have been particularly, you know, pushed towards me as a consumer, that have really disappointed me, whether that just be that they were underwhelming and alright reads, or I actively did not like them for some reason. I would of course be interested to hear your thoughts on any of these books, and what books do you just feel are so overhyped, that are just constantly praised, constantly raved about, that you picked up because there was so much hype around them and then they fell flat for you? I want to know. But until next time guys, happy reading. I hope you don't read any books that disappoint you anytime soon, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.